The spiritual significance of multiple marriages. When discussing polygamy, it's important to approach the subject with sensitivity and a willingness to understand before judging. In many cultures today, monogamy is the standard. However, in other societies, both historically and in the present, polygamy has been practiced within deeply religious and spiritual frameworks. Rather than being rooted solely in desire or social control, multiple marriages are often connected to ideas of commitment, responsibility, and the building of community. Polygamy, specifically polygyny, the practice of one man marrying multiple women, has been observed in various religious traditions, including Islam, certain interpretations of Judaism and Christianity, and within many indigenous cultures. While controversial from a modern Western perspective, in the spiritual traditions where polygamy exists, it often carries a different significance than many assume. This conversation isn't about promoting or condemning polygamy, but about understanding its role in spiritual life and what it reveals about the values and structures of the communities that practice it. Polygamy in Islam: rules, responsibilities, and mercy. Islam is the most prominent religion today in which polygyny is still practiced, though it is not a requirement or universal expectation. The Quran addresses polygamy in Surah An-Nisa 4:3, which states, "If you fear that you will not deal justly with the orphans, then marry those that please you of other women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one." This verse often serves as the foundation for the practice, but it also sets important boundaries. The permission to marry up to 4 women is not given as a free license. It is deeply conditioned on the ability to maintain justice, fairness, and equal treatment among all wives. If a man fears he cannot meet that standard, the Quran recommends marrying only one. From a spiritual perspective, this shows that polygamy in Islam is not about indulgence, but about responsibility and justice. The historical context also matters. At the time the verse was revealed, there were many widows and orphans as a result of war. Polygamy was, in part, a compassionate response to provide support and protection to vulnerable members of society. In many Islamic communities where polygyny is still practiced today, it is approached with a strong sense of duty. A man is expected to provide emotionally, financially, and spiritually for each wife. Each marriage is a binding covenant, not just a personal commitment, but a moral and religious obligation. While not all Muslims agree with the practice today, many choosing monogamy exclusively, it's important to understand that in Islamic tradition, polygamy is spiritually justified when exercised with fairness, humility, and care for others. Biblical and historical perspectives on polygamy also appears in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. Figures such as Abraham, Jacob, David, and Solomon all had multiple wives. In each of these stories, the marriages were not merely about personal preference, but were often tied to family lineage, tribal alliance, and survival of the people. For instance, Jacob's marriage to Leah and Rachel and his relationships with their handmaids led to the birth of the 12 tribes of Israel. These stories are complex and often come with tension, rivalry, and heartache. Yet they also show how polygamous marriages played a role in shaping spiritual history and the formation of a people. While the New Testament places greater emphasis on monogamy, particularly in the teachings about church leadership and marriage in Paul's epistles, it does not overtly condemn polygamy. Instead, It elevates the ideal of one man, one woman unions as a model of love and mutual submission. Early Christianity gradually moved toward monogamy as the social norm, especially under Roman influence. But it's worth noting that polygamy in the biblical context was not treated as inherently immoral. It was a reality of life for many and often carried spiritual weight, especially when connected to covenantal relationships and God's broader plan for a nation or community. Indigenous traditions and communal harmony. In many indigenous cultures, polygamy has been a traditional part of community structure. Rather than being centered on male dominance, it often functions as a way to strengthen bonds between families, balance social roles, and ensure the care of all members of the tribe or village. In some African communities, polygamy is still practiced today as a system that promotes stability and prosperity. A man with multiple wives is expected to support large, extended families, including not just his spouses and children, but their relatives as well. These arrangements are often grounded in deep respect for the earth, the ancestors, and the interconnectedness of life. Among certain Native American tribes, polygamy was practiced selectively. A man might marry multiple sisters, for example, as a way of keeping family units intact. Widows were sometimes taken in through polygamous marriage to ensure they and their children were cared for. These relationships were based on practical care and spiritual duty, not exploitation. In these traditions, the spiritual justification for polygamy lies in harmony with nature, respect for life, and the building of cooperative communities. It reflects a worldview where personal relationships are integrated with communal responsibility and balance. Polygamy and spiritual commitment. One of the most misunderstood aspects of polygamy is the assumption that it is primarily driven by lust or ego. While abuse and imbalance can occur, as in any system of relationships, the spiritual foundations of polygamy in religious contexts emphasize discipline, sacrifice, and responsibility. In polygamous marriages based on faith, the commitment is not diminished by the presence of more than one spouse. Instead, commitment is multiplied. Each relationship requires care, attention, and presence. A spiritually grounded polygamous marriage calls for the same level of emotional depth and loyalty as a monogamous one, if not more. In that way, polygamy can be seen not as a rejection of deep connection, but as an expanded model of it. The ability to honor multiple marital bonds, if done ethically and sincerely, reflects a complex form of devotion, one that mirrors certain aspects of spiritual leadership, communal support, and divine justice. Polygamy and gender justice. A complex dialogue. Still, polygamy remains a contentious issue, especially in conversations about gender equality. Critics argue that, in many societies, it disproportionately favors men and can leave women vulnerable. And it's true that the spiritual ideals of fairness and care are not always upheld. However, within the religious frameworks where polygamy is permitted, these concerns are often taken seriously. In Islam, for example, women can and do set conditions in marriage contracts. In some modern Muslim societies, polygamy is rare or even legally restricted, with strong oversight to prevent harm. There are also voices within these traditions advocating for reform, gender balance, and new interpretations of sacred texts. These conversations are ongoing and often reflect a deep desire to align ancient practices with contemporary understandings of dignity and equality without losing the spiritual richness of the tradition. Polygamy as a spiritual mirror. At its core, Polygamy in religion is not simply about numbers, it is about responsibility. It holds up a mirror to how we understand love, duty, and the balance between personal desire and community well-being. Whether or not one agrees with the practice, polygamy challenges modern assumptions about what spiritual commitment looks like. It asks hard questions. Can love be shared fairly? Can justice coexist with complexity? What does it mean to care for more than one person with equal depth and devotion? And perhaps most importantly, how do we build relationships of any kind that reflect our highest values? The practice of polygamy is not easily summarized. It is shaped by history, theology, and the lived experience of millions of people around the world. While it may not align with every person's beliefs or lifestyle, it carries significance in the spiritual traditions where it exists. In these traditions, multiple marriages are not about excess, but about embracing responsibility and community. They reflect a vision of family that is broad, relational, and at its best, rooted in care and sacred duty. Thank you for taking the time to explore this complex topic with me. If this message helped you think more deeply, or perhaps just differently, about religious practices and human relationships, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe. This space is for respectful, thoughtful dialogue, and together we can continue learning, reflecting, and growing in understanding. Until next time, take care of yourself, your relationships, and your spirit.